You're listening to the Learn Like a CPA podcast, where we talk about all things real estate, tax strategy, and personal finance. Whether you're a real estate investor looking to scale your portfolio, or you're an individual wanting to take your financial freedom journey to the next level, this is a podcast for you. Welcome back to the Learn Like a CPA show. Today we are going to be breaking down the STR Wealth Conference in Nashville in early June. So this was the first inaugural wealth conference for short-term rentals. And when I say did it over-deliver expectations, it blew past, I think, anybody's expectations. I talked to a few people before the event. I talked to some people after the event as well, even after the first day of speakers. And there was so much value and content, even within that first day, that it was like, okay, we could wrap up and go home now. There was so much value that was provided in this content, in this conference, the relationships, the networking, and it was off the charts. And we say first inaugural because hopefully they plan on doing it again. And Bill Faith and Michael Shodron. So I've been working with Bill for over a year now, recently joined his mastermind group back in January. And what I could say about Bill is that he's actually owned 5 or 6 other businesses, successful businesses that he's been invested in before he even got into short-term rentals. But what I could say about Bill is that he has the heart of a teacher, and he really has hospitality at the front of his mind, and no matter what sort of business venture that he goes into. So when he reached out to me back in, I want to say January or February, and asked, hey, how do you feel about speaking in front of 1,000 people in June or July? Would you be comfortable with that? I said, absolutely. Because I knew that the sort of content that he was looking to provide people and that experience was going to be second to none. The other host, Michael also has that same sort of personality where the heart of a teacher. And we'll get into Michael's story a little bit later in the podcast episode, but he left it all on the table, everything out there for us to understand about how you go from the transition between the corporate world to finding and learning about how you can scale a business in real estate and gaining financial freedom. So to talk about the guest speakers, first up was Tajani. And TJ was awesome. So he was an engineer by trade. He went to school for engineering. I believe he went to school in Texas. And he started his engineering career on a bunch of boats. He would be gone for a few months at a time on rigs. And while he was there, he was spending his time learning and reading about real estate. And when he finally got into real estate, he was doing BRRRR method to start, finding properties, adding value, fixing it up. He really showed how quickly you can actually scale through real estate and build wealth. And his presentation was so detailed, and he left everything on the table as far as he showed people how he acquired deals. He showed people how he financed deals, how he was able to add value to that deal. He broke it all down with the exact numbers. He talked about his going forward strategy, what he's looking to do moving forward with short-term rentals and the BRRRR method. One of the things that he said that really resonated with me was 2 quotes. So one of them that he said was, it takes money to be in real estate, but it doesn't have to be your money, right? It takes money to make money, but it doesn't necessarily have to be your money up front. And I've released other podcasts on this of how you can partner with people, right? I have this trait, you have that trait, maybe you have the capital, let's partner together. Or using other people's money, such as the banks or private capital, hard money loans. It takes money to make money in real estate, but it doesn't have to be your money. And what he also said was, real estate requires 3 different things: time, experience, and capital. You need the time to fund the deals and run the properties. You need the experience to know what to do when things go well and things go bad. And you also need the capital to fund the deals. But what he said was, you don't necessarily need all 3. You don't need to do all of them by yourself. You can bring one of those or 2 of those aspects to the table and then find somebody else to partner with for that third aspect. Next up was Chris Ledwich from The Lender. So he runs a lending firm where he is not just a typical lender in the sense that they're basing debt off of your W-2 or what you have going on from a business perspective. But he talks about all these creative and variety of ways that you can fund your next rental deal. Instead of using traditional loans, conventional loans, he finds a way that you can use a certain product, especially if you're an entrepreneur or you're a business owner. So for those of you who are self-employed, which I've been dealing with this myself, it's very hard to get a loan those first couple of years of you being self-employed because the banks want to see your tax returns. And if you haven't been self-employed for a long period of time, you're not going to have tax returns to show to a bank. So what is the edge, or what is the product? It's using non-traditional type of loans such as DSCR products, which are solely based on the property's ability to service debt, as well as you having reserves, as well as what's called a bank statement loan. So a bank statement loan is essentially what it says. You just need to prove that you have in your bank account the amount of money for the down payment as well as the amount for reserves. So he was talking about all these creative ways for you to fund your next deal if maybe you're not a traditional investor, you have a W-2 income, which is very powerful because oftentimes a lot of people's question is, well, how do I fund my next deal, or how do I get started? And he kind of broke it. He left it all on the table too. Next up was Julie George. So Julie is actually from Australia. She's very passionate about what she does and truly has the heart of the teacher and wants to help other people. Her background is that she went from 0 to 130 properties under management within 18 months, and then she sold the business. She sold it for an amount of money that she can't disclose, but what she did in her presentation was she actually broke down her entire organizational chart. How much she paid each person to work in the business. And she essentially said that I'm fine with giving commission or value or equity to other people if that means I'm more hands-off and allowing that person to better themselves. So she's really important because she empowers people below her and wants to help them build wealth and financial freedom. Next up in the series of speakers there was a panel with both Mike and Bill's wife and Jenny from Wayfair, and they talked a lot about this idea that the design in your investment property is crucial part of the operations, and that you don't need to spend an insane amount of money, but you need to spend the right amount of money. They spoke on how an accent wall, for example, can make your listing pop and is very easily interchangeable. So some of these ideas with design is one of those things where you may not be good at interior design, but you might be able to hire somebody, an interior designer that is going to be able to knock that out of the park for you. And with Airbnb and Vrbo, it really depends on that first, I would say 10 to 15 seconds of that potential guest looking at your listing. That determines it all. If you don't have proper staging, decoration, and optimizing your listing, they're just going to thumb through to the next property. So next up, I presented next. And in my presentation, I got to tell you, I was more nervous, I think, before the presentation than I was when I actually was giving the presentation. Because once I settled in and I got in a rhythm and I was talking about what I was knowledgeable about, I really started to kind of capture the audience and see where exactly each person's sort of stage of their investing journey was, and how tax strategy, no matter what you do in real estate, from fix and flip to wholesaling to STR owning, arbitrage, co-hosting, talked about it all, laid it all out on the table, and kind of showed people how they can use the tax code to build wealth. And I got a tremendous amount of support, people coming up to me afterwards, wanting to ask me questions. And what was funny is I said at the very end of my presentation, I said, if you have a question or you just want to pick my brain, I'll be out on Broadway tonight. Come buy me a drink at the bar and you can ask me any questions that you want. And what was funny is I went down probably 4 or 5 bars that night on Broadway, and every single bar there was somebody there that was at the conference and recognized me and of course bought me a drink. But I was able to, even after the conference was over, I was able to mingle with other people who were there, who were able to probe and ask those questions that needed to be asked when it comes to tax strategy. So I had a blast. I love giving my presentation, and I really hope that everybody enjoyed it too. And we should be able to by the time this podcast goes live, you should be able to get a recording of my presentation as well as others' presentations. If you didn't go to the event, it's definitely something you're going to want to check out, because that information alone, even on the first day, is tremendous value, and it's going to be 5-10x what you pay for the recordings. Next up was Michael's talk, and so Michael really focused on how you can change the reality in which you live and continue to work at it. So it's only a problem. His talk was the biggest fear that he might have is looking back on life and regretting not taking certain actions. And I think his entire spiel was not focused on how to run an STR or what to do, but it was all about the mindset that's needed to be a successful host, to be a co-host, to be an Airbnb, an STR owner. His presentation was all about mindset. And in my opinion, Mike's talk was so authentic that I don't think the conference would have been the same without it. After Mike, we had Bill and Mike talking about operational strategies. So if you know Bill he owns and operates his own STRs, whereas Mike does what's called arbitrage or co-hosting. So when you arbitrage a property, it's where you kind of rent it out from the landlord and then you turn around and Airbnb or list it. It's two different methods, two different strategies, and you can use either one depending on what your goals are. And the presentation for Bill and Mike was talking about, hey, depending on your goals and your mindset, you might have a different approach to the STR game. And they were really able to open up the door for people, because if you're just getting started and you don't have the capital, arbitrage is a great way because it requires the least amount of capital up front. Versus, once you gain that experience, maybe you look to owning the property yourself because you're going to take advantage of the equity pay down, the appreciation, the tax benefits, some of the things that I talk about in my other podcasts. So on the second day, and this is right before I had to leave, so I'm not going to speak on the other conference speakers because I wasn't there for their presentation, but on the second day, the first person was Shawn Rakovich, and he does Airbnb arbitrage. So again, he does where he will go and lease a property from a landlord and then turn around and Airbnb that. And his strategy was that you can get in for the least amount of money possible because you're only going to need, say, 6 to 9 months worth of reserves in order to operate that property, as opposed to needing the serious amount of capital, especially now, that's required to own and operate an Airbnb. His energy was absolutely insane, and he broke down exactly how to play the game as far as how to talk to potential landlords about renting out their property and why you want somebody that's arbitraging the property as opposed to a regular tenant. He talked about how he transitioned from delivering newspapers at 24 to getting into the Airbnb game, and I can't remember exactly what sort of figures he was working with, but I definitely know it was in the millions. So to go from delivering newspapers at 24 to having $1 million business is a feat that a lot of us would like to replicate, but it's something to awe over. And like I said, his energy and how he broke down items and he pivoted his presentation towards the audience, what they wanted to know. He was awesome. And right after he presented, he sat down next to me and he goes, "Hey, I kind of understand what you're talking about and why owning real estate is important from tax purposes and benefits." But he's like, "Explain it to me like I'm a child." And I sat there with Shawn, and in 30 seconds, I explained to him how he could save over $1 million in taxes by owning rental properties. And I make it that, at least I try to make it that simple of, hey, here's how much money you got coming from your business. Here's how much real estate you need to buy. How do we make those two work together in order to offset your tax liability? And I think I was able to break that down to Shawn in about 30 seconds. Some people that I met for the first time at the event that didn't speak there, but I want to give a worthy shout out. First was JB Bullock and Aiden Grohl. So they're part of the Blue Gems STR group. We actually got to film a podcast together, in which I will try to link in the show notes as well. We filmed a podcast together talking about short-term rental investing as well as tax benefits, of course. We got to sit down afterwards and eat dinner, walk around the city. So I had a really good experience with those two guys. The next person that I met was Jabbar. So what's interesting about him is that he's 20 years old. He's an active duty Marine, and he already owns, I believe, 3 properties now, and he's under contract on more properties. So this kid, he's doing everything at the age of 20. And if you had an excuse of time or, children or this or that, he's an active duty Marine and he's only 20 years old and he's out here investing in real estate. And what was funny is I was waiting in line to get into the conference to get my VIP badge, to get my stuff, and he was right behind me, and I chalked up a conversation with him. That's when I found out he's got his own Instagram page and he teaches other people how to do this, and he's really cool. And after the first day, I was like, hey, we're gonna be meeting at this bar later. You should come over here. And then I remembered, oh wait, he's not even 21 yet. Does he have a fake? How is he gonna get into the bar? But shout out to him. And the last person that I met that's worthy, and I've met a ton of worthy people too, right? So these are just the ones that I engage with the most. I feel Natalie Palmer. So she teaches people how to run Airbnbs as well. I filmed a podcast with her, which should be coming out soon. I'll try to link it in the show notes as well. Filmed a podcast with her. She teaches people how to do Airbnb, co-hosting, arbitrage, you name it. She was joy to hang around with and talk to. And lastly, and most important, I think, in the entire scheme of things, I was able to bring my fiance. And so for those of you who know, my fiance is a nurse, and at the beginning, she wasn't as interested in real estate, but she's starting to come across real estate, and I'm starting to teach her more and more about it. And I think that's important too, because on one of the days, one of the conference days in the morning, I had 5 conversations back to back with people, and the conversation wasn't even around where to invest, how to invest, tax benefits. The entire conversations were actually around how do you get your significant other on board. And I think that's one of the things that holds at least me and some other people back from real estate investing or investing in general, because you have one spouse that gets the bug or that itch to invest, and so they're trying to go in one direction, and then you have another spouse that isn't sold on it yet, or maybe they're in opposite directions. It's very hard to go the route that you want to go if you're dragging a sled behind you, per se. And I think one of the things that the conference opened up my eyes was I was able to show her, like, hey, these are everyday people that went from their corporate job or their day job and then started investing in real estate or started getting into real estate full time, and here's what their life looks like now. So we talked a lot about in this episode of recapping the STR Wealth Conference. I had a pleasure speaking and being there. I learned a ton myself. I got to meet a ton of great people, and I will be speaking at a conference in October. It'll be October 15th and 16th in Las Vegas for STRs, if you're interested in joining that. As well as I will be having a boot camp that's focused on bookkeeping as well as tax strategy for real estate investors. That's going to be August 10th, 11th, and the 12th. So reach out to me if you want to know any more information about that. Make sure to subscribe and like the podcast, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're watching this content. And if you have a question or you want to see something show up on the next podcast, reach out to me on Instagram or Twitter at LearnLikeACPA. Leave me a DM and maybe you'll see it on the next podcast. Thanks for tuning in today, and we'll see you on the next episode.